Here's what's coming up on The World Today. The surge in coronavirus cases in India draws global attention as nations and companies rally to help. The European Commission is suing drug company AstraZeneca for delayed deliveries of COVID-19 vaccines. Plus, Myanmar's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi makes another appearance in court, and her lawyers worry over her physical health. Thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Global efforts are consolidating to help India out of its coronavirus situation as the surge in cases continue. Added to the list now are Google and Microsoft, whose heads have pledged millions of dollars in funding, and with its shortage of oxygen supplies. We'll have that report in a moment because the story is that Google's head and Microsoft, the head of Google's parent company, Alphabet, has pledged $18 million for India, and the head of Microsoft has also pledged with helping India with its oxygen supplies. On Sunday, the United States, UK, and the EU also promised India help, the US promising to provide materials for vaccines in India. We have joining us now Chairman, Special Advisory Committee on COVID-19, Professor Oyewale Tomori, who joins us from Ibadan in Oyo State. Professor Tomori, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
What do you make of the surge in the coronavirus cases in India?
I think it's very worrying. It's also a warning for us. India was doing very well before this surge came. But then there are a few things that reported that they were doing, which I think may be responsible. We're told that political campaigns were going on in different states of India. We also were told about this festival at the Ganges River, which attracted millions of people. I think the combination of that, and then the fact that most people have kind of abandoned the non-pharmaceutical interventions, all combined to bring the surge into India.
Yeah, and it's been reporting really high numbers lately. Yesterday, there were almost 350,000 new cases in 24 hours. Today, the figures have also gone up to about over 300, almost 340,000 cases in India. Now, you see the similarities between India and Nigeria. They both have huge populations. And I'm just wondering whether, Nigeria could also be at risk of experiencing the sort of surge that India is going through at the moment.
I think one or two of the factors responsible for the Indian is there. I mean, we have abandoned the non-pharmaceutical interventions in the country, so that's number one. Number two, we are not vaccinating like India. I mean, we are not even started, so that's another major concern. I also worried about, I don't know what's going to happen, when we finish the Ramadan fast, but it's going to bring in many people. So we see factors that were in India. Now we're in a lull period. And if all these factors come to play, and then we don't know what kind of variants we're getting in the country. So, of course, if it comes, I won't be surprised.
Indeed, no surprise there. Professor, just before we continue, I'd like to draw attention to, the story, which is that the global efforts are increasing. More countries rally to help India. We have that report on the situation in the country. This has become a common sight in India. Loved ones administering oxygen to family members outside of hospitals as the country battles with rising number of COVID-19 cases and a shortage of oxygen. Crowded hospitals running out of oxygen has overwhelmed the country's health system. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had on Sunday asked citizens to get vaccinated and exercise caution, while hospitals and doctors are putting out notices saying they are unable to cope with the rush of patients. The US, UK and the EU have promised aid in ventilators and materials for vaccines. Now, tech giants Google and Microsoft are pledging their support as well. Sundar Pichai, head of Google and parent company Alphabet, says he was devastated by events and the firm would provide $18 million in funding. Microsoft boss Satya Nadella says he's also heartbroken and would help India in this shortage of oxygen supplies. Both chief executives were born in India. Back in India, some are trying to leverage the power of Twitter to source oxygen cylinders, hospital beds and other forms of help. People seeking help and those with information of resources have been sharing telephone numbers of volunteers, vendors who have oxygen cylinders, or drugs and details of which medical facility can take patients using hashtags like COVIDSOS. Today, many patients form long lines outside hospitals, some with oxygen masks in ambulances. Infections in the last 24 hours have risen to 352,991. With overcrowded hospitals in Delhi and elsewhere turning away patients after running out of supplies of medical oxygen and beds. India has asked the European Union to send medical oxygen and Gilead's antiviral drug remdesivir to fight the surge in cases. With the surge, also is a rise in the number of deaths, resulting in more cremations. The country, with a population of 1.3 billion, has an official tally of 17.31 million infections and 195,123 deaths, after 2,812 deaths overnight. The Health Ministry says the figures probably run higher. Professor Tomori, you just saw that report, the number of cases rising 352,991 in 24 hours alone, and the number of cremations have also increased. Really dire situation. But what is also surprising is that India has had a huge vaccination campaign, and yet it's seeing also a huge surge in cases. What does this say then about the vaccinations?
I think what it tells us is that vaccine alone is not the solution. Vaccine is just an additional to the things they are already doing. If you break one of those MPI things, you are not wearing your mask, you are not washing your hands, you are gathering together in large quantities. Of course, the vaccine only has a little bit of action to do. So it only adds on. It is not the totality of it. And you remember the British Prime Minister did say that in terms of what is more effective, it was more the lockdown than the vaccine. Because when you lock down, then you reduce the transmission of the disease, the spread from different people to different people. But when you let loose, then of course the virus will let loose and spread. And in India, we're looking at 1.something billion people. So even if you vaccinate 300 million, it's still a little chunk compared to the large size of the country.
Wow, and speaking of those vaccinations, it's already been established, as you said, that one still needs, those non-pharmaceutical processes for staying safe, the wearing of face masks, the washing of hands, the use of hand sanitizers, and then social distancing. People are still being vaccinated, though. So should they test before vaccination? Because I'm wondering, if people are just getting vaccinated, shouldn't they also have a test, to check if they have the coronavirus? What could happen if an infected person gets the vaccine?
Yeah, ideally, with the efficacy of the vaccine that we're getting, the chances are that people would develop immunity. But then immunity doesn't develop the day you get the vaccine. It takes around 10 days to about 2 weeks before your body gets the level of immunity that can protect you. And of course, we know we have to give 2 shots with this vaccine. Therefore, that first shot will only give you up to a level, not strong enough. The second dose will have to bring it to the maximum level. I think the problem with people is assuming that once you get the vaccine, then therefore you are free. No, you still need that interval between the time you get the vaccine and the time you develop. You're still vulnerable. And so that's why it is still advisable. Please wear your mask. And again, but the vaccine does not protect you from exposure, nor does it sometimes even protect you from infection. All it does is it stops your infection becoming disease or hospitalization. So once people know the limit of the vaccine, then they will know that they need to add other things to it to help the vaccine achieve the objective of what it is. As for people who have had an infection before, if you have recovered from the infection, there's no reason. In fact, the vaccine should boost your immunity. But of course, if during the period when you are still recovering or you have the disease, getting an additional vaccine may be an added burden on the body and could be the other result. But then once you recover, the body has some immunity. Getting a vaccine will also boost that immunity. You see what we do with polio, give it to children at different intervals. We do the same thing with measles, even yellow fever. I mean, after you've had it, you still get a second dose. That will boost up your immunity. So people who have recovered from COVID should get their vaccine because it also helps them to have a better level of immunity.
Yeah, Professor, just very quickly, I want to go back to the 1918 pandemic, the Black Flu, which eventually, disappeared after 2 years due to herd immunity. Is there hope that the coronavirus could clear up much faster, seeing that we do have vaccines now? Then there were no vaccines for the Black Flu.
Yeah, I think I believe that this is what is going to happen. But remember, in those days, traveling was not as fast as what it is now. So spread was not as, it took a much longer time and involved millions of people. Eventually, when many people, the so-called herd immunity came up, the epidemic died down. I suspect this is going to be the same. But then we need to have, this is quite a different virus, but I think they all behave similarly. It's a respiratory virus. And eventually, I think we'll probably end up to endemic state. It's not that there won't be cases. There will be cases, but not the kind of epidemic proportions we are getting right now.
Professor Yewale Tomori, the chairman of the Special Advisory Committee on COVID-19 in Nigeria. Thank you again for speaking with us on The World Today.
My pleasure, Marachi. Thank you.
Well, staying with the coronavirus, the European Commission says it has launched a legal action against AstraZeneca for not respecting its contract for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines and for not having a reliable plan to ensure timely deliveries. And under the contract, the company had committed to making its best reasonable efforts to deliver 180 million vaccine doses to the EU in the second quarter of this year for a total of 300 million in the period from December to June.
Indeed, the Commission has started last Friday a legal action against the company AstraZeneca on the basis of breaches of the advance purchase agreement. The reason indeed being that the terms of the contract or some terms of the contract have not been respected and the company has not been in a position to come up with a reliable strategy to ensure the timely delivery of doses. What matters to us in this case is that we want to make sure that there is a speedy delivery of a sufficient number of doses that the European citizens are entitled to and which have been promised on the basis of the contract. So the Commission has indeed started this legal action on its own behalf and on behalf of the 27 member states that are fully aligned in their support for this procedure. Thank you.
We'll have more of the row between the European Commission and AstraZeneca after the break. Plus, some of the wins from the Oscars last night. Try this again. Welcome back to The World Today. We're staying with our coronavirus stories, though, with the European Union Commission suing AstraZeneca for not delivering on its supply of COVID-19 vaccines and for not reliable plan to ensure the timely deliveries. The EU had ordered 180 million doses in the second quarter of this year for a total of 300 million in the period from December to June. VOA's Lisa Bryant is in Paris, from where she joins us. Lisa, what really was in that contract between the EU and AstraZeneca, and how come AstraZeneca is being blamed for not delivering on its own part of the contract?
That's a good question. It's a $60 million question, I guess, right now. According to reports, I haven't seen the contract itself, it was exactly as you suggested. There was 300 million doses that the EU had ordered that should have been delivered by about a third of that. According to reports, something like 30 million have been delivered to date. There was an extra 100 million option that it could have also ordered. So the EU has essentially said, look, AstraZeneca, you are not honoring at least the spirit of this contract, and therefore we are going to sue you. We're going to take you to court, of which AstraZeneca AstraZeneca says, I am very disappointed, but we are going to, defend ourselves in court. One other thing about this contract, according to reporters who have seen it, apparently there is nothing in the contract, according to the reports, that there's sort of an opt-out clause for AstraZeneca if there are problems with delivery. And an expert that I've spoken to before says there's also language that AstraZeneca will make its best faith effort to deliver, but it doesn't mean it's absolutely necessary that it does deliver. So it's bad news for AstraZeneca, but it might be difficult also for the EU to be able to press its cause in court, according to these reports.
Well, I don't know any country which has received all of the vaccines it has paid for. But then what happens then to production of COVID-19 vaccines by AstraZeneca following this suit?
Well, if it does deliver its 100 million doses by June, as it's promised, it still has another 200 million that it owes the EU, at least for the first half of the year. And the European Union has made clear that they're not interested in ordering that extra 100 million to AstraZeneca. In fact, they're actually sort of changing their focus, and they're zooming in on Pfizer, competitor. It's a different type of vaccine, but they're both COVID-19 vaccines. And there's discussions that it wants to order an enormous amount for, let's say, the next 2 years ahead. So AstraZeneca still has some orders, quite a few orders to follow up with. But it's quite clear that the EU is looking elsewhere for its future deliveries.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of pressure on those drug companies to deliver, not just to the EU, but also around the world. Lisa, thanks again for joining us, and do stay safe.
Thank you. You as well.
Now, a member of the legal team of detained Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi says that she appeared thinner than previous appearances during a court hearing that the former state councillor attended via video link. The 75-year-old has been charged with various offences, including violating a colonial-era Official Secrets Act that could see her jailed for 14 years. She was detained when Myanmar's military took power in a coup on February 1st.
Maybe for the latest case, we presented all 6 lawyers, presented our board of attorney to the court, and the court asked Dr. San Suu Kyi whether she approved it, and she said she approved it. And those 2 issues conducted. The first, the presentation of the power of attorney, and then for the second issue, the meeting of lawyers and clients. Whether is it possible then, as in the former cases, the police was set up, the police was put on present, and the police answered he had already put those papers to his superiors, but no reply yet like this.
Let's go over now to Haiti, where an epidemic of kidnappings is sweeping through the country. The latest misfortune to beset the Caribbean island nation as a deepening political unrest and economic misery exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic fuels gang crime. In one of the most dramatic recent cases, gunmen kidnapped a Haitian pastor and 3 others during a ceremony that was streamed live on Facebook. And in the video, 2 choir members can be seen singing a hymn before they suddenly drop their mics and cower by the side of the altar. As piano music continues to play, a man wielding a rifle enters a screen and is seen taking them away. The incident, streamed on Facebook and YouTube, took place on April 1st at the Seventh-day Adventist Gospel Creole Ministry Church in Dikini, on the outskirts of the capital, Port-au-Prince. 4 were released 3 days later. Our kidnappers last year tripled to 234 cases compared to 2019, according to official data compiled by the United Nations.
Bound me. He bound me literally, legs and arms. I was bound. And It was to make pressure on my people so they could move money faster because they have weapons. I'm in Port-au-Prince. I could die at any time. I'm in Haiti. Kidnappers are all over the place because the government cannot protect the fellow citizens. The government can just harm us, threat us. That's all they could do. They cannot protect us.
Still studying the situation in Haiti. But U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will embark tomorrow on his first virtual trip to Africa, where he will visit Kenya and Nigeria and engage with young people from across the continent. Secretary Blinken will begin his virtual travel to Africa, meeting with Young African Leadership Initiative alumni. In a 10 Questions with Tony event, YALI alumni will have an opportunity to engage with the Secretary on a range of topics, including the role of youth in the future of Africa, economic developments, democracy and good governance, climate change as well. He will then travel to Nigeria, virtually of course, where he will underscore our shared goals of strengthening democratic governance, building lasting security and promoting economic ties and diversification. People-to-people connections underpinned by the dynamic Nigerian diaspora in the United States amplify and strengthen our relationship, he said of his trip. And as we end the world today, the much-anticipated Oscars winners of 2021 have been announced. Well, they were announced on Sunday. Director Chloe Zhao became the first Asian woman to win the Best Director award, as well as winning the award for Best Picture for her film, Nomadland. Actress Frances McDormand took home the lead actress Oscar for her role in the film on the night of the return to Hollywood glamour after a long pandemic shutdown. Britain's Daniel Kaluuya was named Best Supporting Actor for his role as 1960s Black Panther activist Fred Hampton in Judas and the Black Messiah. The winners of the night celebrated with big smiles and celebrity company backstage, showing off their awards to the limited crowd of photographers.
Have your can opener.
Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely marvelous. I mean, it's a very small, modest film, and I think none of us were expecting this really. Although we had hoped certainly that it would go to Anthony Hopkins, who I think is really given one of his very best performances ever. Yes, nobody. It was very socially distanced. It was very. It was. I have to say, it was extremely odd, but nonetheless, exciting.
I'm sure Tinkletown had lots of fun last night. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.